There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a little bit of a frosty Friday reads for you, but I am so psyched, I don't care. My hands are cold. I don't know if I want to open this hot can of coffee or just use it as a hand warmer. It's about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. 8 o'clock in the morning, I think. So I'm in my favorite little park near my house, and I'm alone here, except I'm surrounded by pigeons. They don't seem to be scared of me. Another absolutely fantastic reading week. I have so much to tell you, so let's get started. So I finished 7 books this week, which might be a record for me since I started my BookTube channel. Now, admittedly, half of them were novellas. So the first one was this writer's manual, Starting from Scratch, a different kind of writer's manual by Rita Mae Brown. It had been a 5-star read for me in the early 1990s and is now a rather disappointing 3-star read. For me, 3 stars is a bad book. This is so dated, but I enjoyed her humor. She obviously knows what she's talking about because she's had a very successful writing career. And there were parts of it that I really, really loved, especially the chapter that I kept referring back to over the years and having such a clear memory of, where she talked about Latinate versus Anglo-Saxon diction. But she doesn't give any sources for what she says there, so I don't know if she just pulled it out of her ass or what, but it sure made sense to me that Latinate words such as felicity, cottage, and clothes, Latin/French words, don't tug on you viscerally when you're reading the way their Old English Anglo-Saxon counterparts do. Happiness, hut, dress. So, which sounds more of a, go away, pigeons. Which sounds like more of a viscerally compelling word? Felicity or happiness? Cottage or hut? Clothes or dress? People or folk? Profound or deep? Solitary or lonely? So the words, the second of those pairings is the old Anglo-Saxon words, and those are the words I don't get on with certain kinds of British prose because they're so overly Latinate. And I loved what she said about it, but she doesn't cite any sources. There's no recommendations for further reading. I want to do some further reading on that topic because it's so interesting to me, because this chapter literally changed the way I read and respond to prose fiction. So if any of you out there have any recommendations on where I can, because I've Googled this and it just seems like nobody's talking about it except Rita Mae Brown. So I love her for that. But then she goes too far, I think, because she adamantly says that if you are going to be a writer, you must master Latin. And she's not just saying it would be a good idea. She's saying you're not going to be a good writer unless you have mastered the language, the dead language Latin. Well, that's crazy. I mean, not that it wouldn't be a good idea, but she's just way too adamant about stupid stuff. Like, it's not stupid. How adamant she is about it, even when she wrote this in 1988 or something, was ridiculous. But now, who's going to master Latin? I mean, I'm sure Steve Donahue has mastered it, but you can't write well until you've mastered Latin. That's just silly. And there was a lot of stuff that was really outdated, writing with computers and stuff. Can you imagine what she had to say in 1988 about writing with computers? It was a nostalgic detour for me. I have no writerly aspirations. Any of you who do, I wouldn't really bother with this other than hunting through a few chapters. Her chapters on grammar and language, pretty good, especially that one chapter. But I was disappointed on a reread. This was a buddy read with Chris Wolak of the podcast The Book Cougars, and we enjoyed talking about the book, and it was fun. This was also a buddy read that I began and finished this week. We'll all be burnt in our beds some night. No, I had started it by last Friday, but finished it this week, by Joel Thomas Hines, a Newfoundland writer. And I was really skeptical going in, It's about a violent thug who gets into a fight with his girlfriend, and there's an accident with a teacup, and she gets injured, and they're both addicts, drug addicts, and she claims that he attacked her with the teacup or something, teapot. And that made me uncomfortable. Like, in this era, it's my age-old refrain, what inane lengths do straight male writers have to go to tell a story that's relevant to the modern era? And this one just started off, I was really cynical. But the characterization of the main character did win me over in the first half. And I did begin to, against my better judgment and despite my prejudice, I did care about him. And there was a moment of human warmth between him and the guy he was hitchhiking with, a trucker, that just ripped my heart out. And then the novel just went down the toilet. Now, Peg and I agreed, but the other people in our lovely buddy read, they liked or loved the novel throughout. But the novel went down the toilet for me because he kept writing really disgusting scenes with lots of shit and violence and injury, and that's the life that this young protagonist was living. But it was just so overdone that I just stopped caring, and I was hate reading by the end. I didn't even really know what was going on. I was reading the first and last sentence of each paragraph, the last chapter or two. So did I finish reading the book or did I bail? Sometimes hate skimming is kind of a pseudo bail, but anyway, hated it. I loved what was going on by the middle, and I wished that it had stopped right there, because it would have been a really powerful ending. But it was just way too overdone. Much more successfully, I have read my first work of fiction by Joyce Carol Oates, Blackwater. This was a buddy read with Britta Bowler. I almost loved it. So in other words, I liked it a lot. What hung me up was my ongoing issue with, I don't like having famous historical personages in my fiction, and this is obviously the Ted Kennedy, Mary Jo Kopechne Chappaquiddick incident, and that prevented me from loving it. But what a wonderful piece of writing. I shouldn't be surprised that Joyce Carol Oates can write this well, but it was innovatively structured. Basically, it was, 100 pages? 150 pages of this poor young woman drowning in the car and reliving her life. I don't think I have ever read such a powerful description of what it's like to know that you're dying and not wanting to die and struggling against death in any context. In this one was drowning. It was so beautiful. It really, really blew me away. So that was just gorgeous and disturbing. So it was just that I couldn't quite get around the senator. He was called the senator, and I felt some of the things, just a couple little things that made him to be even more villainous than I think the historical record is. But anyway, that thought process pulls me out a bit. In spite of that, it was really, really good. So I am looking forward to embarking on the next step of my Joyce Carol Oates journey. I started and finished that book of modern Scottish history, a memoir, Stone of Destiny by Ian R. Hamilton, about his 1950 escapade with some other young Scots, where they went to London and they stole the stone of Scone, the Stone of Destiny that the British had stolen from the Scottish nation at the time of whenever, the conquering Scotland, hundreds of years before, had promised to return it, but instead it was ensconced under the throne where the British monarchs are coronated. And these young Scots around 1950, they stole it and took it back to Scotland. And they were, as a piece of writing, it was nothing special. I skimmed a lot of it because, as Mel said in her review, he takes a paragraph to describe himself or one of the other people walking to the car or opening a door and walking into a room. Like, it was just padded with extraneous detail. So I did skim up just a little bit, but you know, the story was fascinating, and it's gotten me all the more deeply curious about Scottish nationalism, Scottish literature, Scottish history. I already was to a certain degree, but just deepened that. And Mel really kind of gave me a lot of tutorials, wonderful, that she thought were too long and boring, but they were fascinating, about Scotland, because she has her own deep fascination with the country. And just in terms of Scottish identity and British identity, even of this main character, like, he was really upset when he found out that King George VI was really upset about this having stolen, and so a letter was sent through a newspaper addressed to the king to say, we love you, you're still our monarch, but the stone belongs to us, so blah blah blah. Like, wow, fascinating layers of identity and culture and history all tied up in a knot in this story. So apparently the stone is now back in Scotland on loan to the Scottish people, but the fact that they got away with it for as many weeks as they did, because they were just bumbling idiots, that's a really good story. Now this is probably the deepest, richest, most profound experience I've had all month, and if not in months, was this novella from Kenya, Weve Not Child by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. It's his debut, and I don't even know how to start talking about it without crying. Don't worry, I'm not going to cry. It was first published in 1964, and I have wanted to read it since I read one volume of wa Thiong'o's memoirs, which I didn't love because I'm not really into memoir, but now I would like to go back and reread it. I bet I'd get a lot more out of it. And I expected that, for some reason, that I wasn't going to love this novel. This novel ripped my heart out. It's one of the most profound works of literature that explores social issues, because I'm really sensitive about fiction that doesn't, if you're going to write about this kind of stuff, don't make it, it's got to be integrated in a really deep, resonant way that preserves the fictionality, the literariness of what I'm reading, and this is probably one of the best, because this is about colonial Kenya, the Maui and the politics and the racism and the class warfare and all of that through the eyes of Njoroge, a young boy at the opening of the story whose poor family scrimps and saves enough money to send him to school. And then Kenya kind of goes down the toilet during his childhood, and his family get embroiled with all of that. I don't want to say any more, but it's so well done, and the ending is so heartbreaking, and I'm not going to say another thing. I thought that the title was a bit melodramatic all these years. I couldn't, now that I've read it, I can't think of another title that would be more perfect. I was just about shaking when I finished this. I'm shaking now because I'm cold, but yesterday when I finished it, he really is, he's the real deal, wa Thiong'o. He does, on the basis of this, I think he deserves the Nobel Prize if there ever is another one. And I want to read everything else. That's all I know how to say. I may do a full review after I've had a few more days to think about it, but I also finished this little 1943 book about Wales by Rhys Davies, The Story of Wales. Is it 1943? If I'm reading the Roman numerals correct. Rhys Davies was a Welsh novelist. He lived most of his life in Britain, and that kind of shows through in this narrative. You can feel his divided loyalties and sometimes the things he's embarrassed about. He seems to be embarrassed about Welsh history and culture. But this was a wonderful introduction to a country that I am becoming all the more deeply fascinated by. And what gorgeous prose. I can't wait to read more by him as fiction. I haven't read anything else he's written. But it was gorgeous to read, and I went down so many rabbit holes reading this 48 page, but tiny print and lots of illustrations. I went down so many rabbit holes of all the things that he mentioned briefly, and I was fact checking, and yeah, he was not telling any lies, I don't think. And it just a wonderful survey of the literature, culture, history, politics, socioeconomic stuff, all about the mines and the mining magnates and the cultural festivals, which I can't pronounce that word, but I'm so interested in that. I am just absolutely fascinated by Welsh culture. And it's all just because of a little dipsy doodle I did looking for translated fiction by women for that readathon. And all of a sudden now, just Wales every day. This was an absolute joy to read. And the last book that I finished this week, I read it over about 3 or 4 days. It's a novella that one of my subscribers, who's got a big 70th birthday coming up next month or something, Wayne, or Southern Biscuits, known to many of you, I think, he didn't want me to think that he was recommending it to me, but he mentioned reading it in a comment earlier this month, and I found out that I had it on Scribd, and I read it, and I'm really glad I did. It is called The Cemetery in Barns by Gabriel Josepovici. And Gabriel Josepovici was not somebody I had ever heard of before. And what a fascinating... Oh, please stop. Many of you have assured me that those background noises don't bother you, so I'm just going to keep on going. He's born in 19... Oh, God. I really have trouble to spot this. Nothing stays. I'm just going to have to move. Alright, well, I don't know if that's much better. I think that sun is just going to be fucking with me for the rest of this video. Anyway, Gabriel Josepovici is a British novelist born in 1940. He was born in France of Russo-Italian, Romano-Levantine Jewish parents. Writes a lot of stuff, criticism and essays and this and that for the Times Literary Supplement. Like, I'm looking at about 15 works of published fiction, almost as many non-fiction. I'd never heard of him. And I read his novella, 2018 novella, The Cemetery in Barns. And I really liked it. I was mystified by it. I want to reread it. I think if I reread it, it might end up being a 5-star read instead of a 4-star read. But I really liked it. It's about a seemingly boring older man, 60s. The point of view is third person limited, and it starts out describing his routine after his wife died in Putney in the UK. He moved to Paris to continue working as a translator and had a very solitary life there. And in describing his daily routine, translating and making his morning tea and walking around and window shopping or whatever in the most excruciating detail. And then on about page 3, the narrative breaks and we realize that this is a story that he's telling in his country home in Wales years later, a few years later, with his second wife. He's talking about his Paris life to the guests at this luncheon party or whatever, and it's really jarring and fascinating, and his wife is bantering with him, and then from there on everything is a little unstable, narratively speaking, which for the most part really worked for me. I was so engaged trying to figure out where are we in the story and who's listening, who is he is he telling this only to me, the reader, or, and again, all third person limited, right? I don't think I've ever read something that played with point of view in this way. It was fascinating. I'm not sure it quite worked, but mainly the thing that prevented me from giving it 5 stars is there's a lot of poetry in it. Most of it's translated, but I hate poetry in fiction. Get it out of my fiction! So I had to take a mark off for that. It just bugs me. Well, he was translating the poetry, so fine, but anyway, it still held my interest deeply, deeply. The story gets progressively darker. And that's all I'm going to say. You should read it. Tell me what you think. My thoughts really gelled when, an hour after finishing it, I read a long review on Goodreads that I didn't reach exactly the same conclusions that reviewer did, but enough of them, and the open-endedness of everybody's going to read a different book when they read this book. And he said that he didn't like all the quoted poetry and stuff. And on his second read, he slowed down with it, and then he loved the book even more. So I suppose that might happen to me, but I don't like... Are you kidding me? I am grumpy. Are you laughing at me? Are you having fun? Bookish? See how many minutes before it happens again. I don't want to move again. I'm getting grumpy. Anyway, fascinating. Fascinating. So those are the books that I finished. Just wait till you hear what I've started. I have started 5 new books this week. I've started Slumber Go Down by Aidan Higgins. This is a buddy read with Christine of Turning 52 Pages. I believe I've got her channel right. This so far has been worth the wait. I'm absolutely loving it. It is weird and wonderful. The writing is dense is not the word, but the style of his prose makes you need to reread everything, not almost every sentence, a couple of times to make sure you caught everything. And the story is of a group of DK Irish sisters, Anglo-Irish sisters, living in a small town just outside of Dublin. I don't know how old they are. I can't figure out how old they are because they seem like really old, decaying old maids in the opening section, which is 1937, and then the story flips back to 1932, and at least one of them seems like a young maid 5 years earlier. So I have no idea how old these people are, but their family used to be wealthy, and now their house has fallen down around them, and it's tracing the history of their lives and loves, and it's really almost creepy, certainly eerie. That house is a main character, and it seems to be kind of fallen down around them, and there's love letters, and there's letters where you only have half of the letter, like that. It's amazing. Really enjoying it. I'll finish it up probably, I don't know, finish it up, yeah, next week. I have started this. I've never got that 100 yen price tag off of it. A Tomb for Boris Davidovich by Danilo Kish. Danilo Kish is a Serbian writer. He died in 1989. He wasn't very old, 54, but he was a Serbian novelist. Wrote in Serbo-Croatian. His father was a Hungarian-speaking Jewish man, and his mother was a Montenegrin Christian. I'm calling this a novella. Every reference I found to it calls it something different. Linked short stories, a collection of short stories, a novel. I'm going to call it a novella. I am not quite halfway through it. This is a buddy read with Lukasz of Totally Pretentious, and we are really enjoying it. We're enjoying it so much. It's so complex, the way that the stories resonate with each other, that we were going to do it over 3 days, and we have decided to slow down. I'm probably going to stretch it out until the end of November, just to really absorb and come to terms with all of the stuff going on in these stories. They're all about revolutionaries and counter-revolutionaries and being betrayed and being informed upon. I am flashing back to Anthony Marra's second novel, The Tsar of Love and Techno. So much that went on in that novel that it reminds me of this, whatever it is, novella. I will have much more to say about it when I've finished, but this was an unexpected surprise. I picked it up for $1 at a used bookstore in Tokyo a couple of years ago, and Lukasz and I were going to buddy read it in December, and I said, you know, it's a novella. Why don't we do it this week? So we are, and boy, it's fascinating. I have started this memoir, nobody knows what kind of genre-bending book by John Berger, and Our Faces, My Heart, Briefest Photos. I just barely read about 7 pages. The writing is so beautiful. I don't know what's going on. It's kind of really poetic and mesmerizing. Maybe the only thing that I'm going to do, because I don't know how to talk about this book yet, is I'll just share this quote. I put it on Instagram. I will read it to you now. One night, walking in the countryside near Prijedor in Bosnia, I found a solitary glowworm with its amber-green light under some grasses. I picked it up and carried it on my finger, where it glowed like an electric opal on a ring. When I approached the house, the other lights competed too strongly, and it put its own out. In the bedroom, I placed it on some leaves on top of the chest of drawers. When I put the light out, the glowworm glowed again. At the back of the dressing table was a mirror which faced the window. If I lay on my side, I saw a star reflected in the mirror, and the glowworm beneath on the chest of drawers. The only difference between them was that the light of the glowworm was slightly greener, more glacial, further away. That last line just... So, maybe I'll have more to say about it later. I don't know what to say about it now. And just this morning, I have started a buddy read with Charlotte of Tired Mama Tries to Read and Ange of Beyond the Pages of a Welsh border novel, Country Dance by Margiad Evans, 1932 novel. Margiad Evans was a British writer English writer who spent much of her adult life living on the Welsh-English border, and this novel is very much a border novel. I've read half of it. It's only a 100-page novella. I read it like at 6 o'clock this morning. Couldn't put it down. I was in bed. I was just turning the pages, the E-pages. A rural story set in 1850. Issues of Welsh and British and English prejudice and class and romance and sex and dancing and language, and it's told so simply that I know that it's deceptively simple, and I couldn't put it down. I can't wait to hear what the other two have to say, because I was confused by part of it, but my confusion was that rich, passionate confusion where I just want to keep reading to find out. It stunned me how much I fell into it in the first section. I'll finish the second, finish it up tomorrow. Oh. So those are the books I've started. Fantastic. I also have one bail to tell you about. Only one, and that was just my own damn fault because I didn't do my due diligence about the book to realize that, good Lord, what the heck, it was not a Sean book. It was The 39 Steps by John Buchan, and it's an adventure story. It's really well done. This was a buddy read with Ollie Bliss, but I hate adventure stories passionately, and it was just killing me. So I read maybe half of it. I can't remember how much I read. Almost half. And I just said to Ollie, I said, at the risk of ending our friendship, I have to bail. I hate it so much. It was like reading a well-written novelization of a James Bond movie. Very well done. Not my thing. So I'm not sure what I'm trying to prove by reading this many books and this much. I am exhausted, but I'm sure having a great time. Now, I'm not going to go do a big song and dance about what's coming up on next week's TBR, and I'm not going to do any more TBR stuff for the remainder of the year because I'm feeling a need to be really spontaneous. But in terms of what I'm committed to, tomorrow, or is it today? Oh, tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm starting this, The Court Dancer by Kyung Suk Shin, a buddy read with Kendra. I am so stoked to begin it. I won't finish this one this month. We couldn't get it started last week, so we're going to do it over 2 weeks, so I'll finish this in the first week in December. But Ollie and I have decided to buddy read this instead. I'll be starting this one later today. This is Edward Louis' the second novel, History of Violence. I've heard pretty good things about it. It's a really intense novel. I don't know if he writes novels. He just calls his memoirs novels, but this is about male-on-male rape. So it's not going to be a light read. And late next week, my final buddy read of November will be this novella by Michelle Roberts, Daughters of the House. This will be a buddy read with Curtis of Curtis Books and Books. Thursday and Friday next week, something like that. Secrets and lies lingering in an old Normandy house where Therese and Leonie, French and English cousins, grow up after the war. I don't know if it was this book, but I think it was this book or one of her books was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. And I'm going to probably try to squeeze in a few more novellas and one or two more nonfiction off my original TBR. We'll see how I do with that, but I'm having the time of my reading life. And I'm not sleeping very much. Kenji's going to be out of town today, but I've got a night out on the town planned, so I won't get a whole bunch of reading done today, but this weekend we'll be reading, and next week too. So that's what's up with me. I've probably forgotten stuff, but that's enough. In fact, I have now been filming for almost 50 minutes. This is going to be a fun edit. That's what's up for me reading-wise. How about you? Thanks for watching.